I was reflecting on the flight down that the last time I went to Atlanta for an ACE mission was to review the courses at Home Depot. And I don't know if any of you has been to Home Depot and seen what's going on there, but I was amazed, at what a little city it is. In fact, in addition to looking at their courses, I thought, well, if I were employed at Home Depot, I could bring my kids in and have daycare right there as I was, at work on the job. I could get my suit pressed in an hour or whatever I need. I could even get some mental health consultation. It was an actual whole environment in Home Depot and very impressive and so forth. So, thinking about the fact that almost approaching 50% of the colleges and universities in the United States now will work with ACE as a partner, why seemingly isn't there a better representation in Georgia? Because I was interested to see, why are we here? What's the motivation? And from a little conversation back and forth, it's that there could be better utilization among the colleges and universities in Georgia to embrace ACE as a process. The next step along that line of reasoning was, so why isn't that happening? And the three reasons I came up with: one, sometimes people don't know enough about the process to really get on board. And we're in an information overload world. Why take the time? Just don't know, let it go. The second, in institutions, maybe some institutions believe that if we farm out too much credit recommendations to a lot of other folks out there, we lose money by doing that. We want the students to come and take our courses and so forth, and that helps us. So that's a possible fear. And the third is a lack of rigor. Maybe not knowing enough about the process, thinks that ACE is just a rubber stamp program. We hire teams who go out there, we want to be customer friendly, and so we just give credit recommendations pretty easily, and so why should we take that into our institution when we know what we're doing? We don't quite know what ACE and other groups like that perhaps are doing. So I hope to take this on, these three questions, and provide more motivation in what we're doing from the field, in addition to our home parent, of course, who hires us to go out as independent contractors and keep the process at a rigorous enough level so that people will follow credit recommendation guidelines. I also have to say that in this part of the program, it's the middle part. You've been listening a while. Listening is tough duty. For my own discipline, I know that. And so, in essence, I've got a frog to deal with. Being from Southern Maryland, we have a saying: if you have to eat a frog, don't wait too long. If you have to eat two frogs, eat the biggest one first. I'll let that sink in a little bit. What do I think the frogs are here? Maybe some other states use that saying as well. I need you to, in fact, get into your materials. You've got a lot there. We sent a lot down. It's taken, some process to get this going, but we just don't want you to lug it back home, right, without really looking at it. We've sent it because we hope you'll use it. So your blue sheet is something that I'll lead with as a guide to Course Evaluation Handbook, and in specific, I'd like you to open to page 5, and, here are all my ands, Credit by Examination Handbook, also page 5. So if you have all those open, I can direct you to some important pages to answer the three questions I posed. You can't go away from here claiming ignorance any longer. You have all these materials, right? You can present it to your folks back at your home institution, and we hope that they will be impressed by, in fact, the rigor of the process going on. Speaking to the rigor, both from the materials we're presenting and from our experience level, Chris and I, to say, here's what we do. And it isn't, just doggy dinner stuff. And as far as fear of losing dollars, in fact, what the data show is that the more that you embrace systems like this to offer to your students, you don't lose dollars. In fact, you bring more students in. Exactly. If you think back to the classic example, some of you are old enough to remember when we started the process of videotape, there was Beta and there was VHS. Who won? We know VHS, right? Which was the better system, arguably? Beta. What happened? VHS made everything accessible to people. It was a clear process. It was open. Beta tried to protect, tried to stay, too close to home, and they didn't win. So again, just as a general analogy and so forth, the more that you embrace other systems out there and offer those opportunities to your students, the better off you are as a home institution as well. Your blue sheet gives you, in fact, some specific advice about the ACE credit review evaluative criteria process. And the first part of that takes you down through hours and so forth, and what review teams focus on with respect to content and learning outcomes, and examining instruments and processes and so forth. But I really want to focus on the 4 levels right now. You also will see that on page 5 and page 6 of your course evaluation handbook, but you won't see it in this detail. So that's the advantage of having your blue sheet. Also, it's just if you want to hand to some representative at your institution just 1 page, right, because that's easier to read than a whole booklet. If they ask for the booklet, you have that right behind the page. Here's what's going on in these 4 processes. We have vocational as the earlier stage, moving to lower division baccalaureate associate degree as the second, upper division baccalaureate degree as the third level of credit recommendation, and graduate degree coursework as the 4th. In each of these processes, credit review teams look at, 1, what's going on with the objectives and the learning outcomes and the way the operations are phrasing what they hope to accomplish. In credit, we tend to talk about education rather than training, because it's not that training isn't going on and that organizations out there might refer to it, but registrars' offices like to think of it as education, not just training, where training implies more of a mindlessness, not that it is that, but that you aren't going deep enough. You're getting trained, but are you getting educated? So we're definitely looking at that, even for vocational education, what's in that process. And of course, a lot of days, you see the nice pyramid here of Bloom's taxonomy. These days, a lot of people have learned there are certain terms to use when you're using learning outcomes, which almost every college and university these days, right, is moving toward, phrasing things as learning outcomes. At GW, we just went through another 10-year review process, and now everyone at GW is writing syllabi, if they weren't doing it before, using learning outcomes as, the preferred language. But it's one thing, as you go through that first step, to say these are our objectives, these are our learning outcomes, phrased according to Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're at a freshman level, you're remembering and so forth, and understanding. As you move higher, you're up into the analyzing, evaluating, and the graduate work creating. It's one thing to get the course objectives and the learning outcomes phrased properly. That's the first part of it. The second part is to use evaluative criteria to measure the learning outcomes suitably according to the stated objective. So that's the second paragraph that you see in each of your 4 levels in the blue sheet. And then examples are given, in fact, of how a team would go forth and say, okay, what's that written exam or the project? How is that measuring the stated learning outcome at an acceptable level? And often, if you ask questions later on about, so give us some actual examples, I have several pages of those just to cue my memory. They're out there all the time. And one of the big problems, if there is a problem, is between the stated learning outcome, which people have learned to say appropriately, and is the measurement tool appropriate to the stated learning outcome. Sometimes we're synthesizing material, evaluating, creating, and so forth as an outcome objective, but the tools are at a freshman level multiple choice composition. That either will be a no credit recommendation or a conditional recommendation. They have to go out if they can fix it in time. They have to do it over before the team will go forward with a credit recommendation. And last, the third basic on your blue sheet under each of the 4 levels area that the teams look at are the instructor qualifications. So we ask to see the credentials. How are the instructors chosen according to experience? Once they're in place, what is the systematic evaluation process that goes through, or the company goes through, to evaluate instructors, not just hired and then forever in place? So every team, in fact, that I lead for sure, gets this in hand, and we go through it in a team meeting before we ever start the review. We sometimes may do it if they're are a number of new reviewers on the team in advance as an email or sometimes even phone conversation to get people in place before they come to the review. Durban, actually, where we reminisced here during the break and so forth, doing a lot of the Fire Academy reviews and so forth, we actually did the New York team right after 9/11. And that was a very memorable review because the fellow that was briefing us on the process gave us a tour, in fact, of Review Team 1 and how their fire truck had been first on the scene and every firefighter was lost in that truck except the guy giving us the review who was staying behind in the firehouse. So that's not here nor there on that, but when we looked out at each other, and that's one of the reviews we had within the past 10 years. So my hope is that you will take a closer look at the blue sheet to see that this is in fact what goes on when a review team goes out to look at whatever organization is asking for the credit review process to take place. It doesn't matter whether it's a sailing team, or something higher level like the Princeton AP exams. ACE really covers the gamut, right, of different kinds of organizations and what they're expecting. The second part that I ask you to also look at, the Credit by Examination Handbook on page 5, is that in addition to the regular course type of process, where organizations are having courses for their employees and they think that the rigor is sufficient for ACE to give a credit recommendation once the inspection has been made of that process, is credit by exam. And this is a little different take on that kind of process, of which you'll see on page 5 and 6. It's similar to the 4 levels and so forth, but you'll also see on page 4 there are 3 basic types of exam material that we deal with. One is a course examination type of exam. You see that, the very first type listed on page 4, which would be similar to, let's say, the AP exam process. High school kids are taking courses and so forth, but to get the AP credit, they have to sit for the exam. And then they have to pass that, generally for most colleges, at level 3. Of 5 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that AP, are evaluating at the end. Generally, most colleges have the cut score at 3. So that is one type of credit by exam process that ACE goes through. Another type is the language type. And that has become so specialized that we actually list it as a separate type of exam because we are looking at, generally it has been in the past, 4 different levels of difficulty of exams, at least for English speakers. So Spanish and Italian and so forth would be in level 1. Chinese, Asian languages would be in level 4, at least for a non-heritage speaker. In addition to the 4 levels of difficulty, there are 10 levels of how well can you speak the language. Novice at level 1, working to superior at level 10. For reviewers to go in and be able to work with 4 levels of difficulty and 10 levels of degree of assessment of language, that takes some doing. So that is a whole separate credit by exam type on the language side. And then the third type are certificate examinations. And in that case, generally speaking, you just don't take one exam and just get a credit recommendation of number of hours for one field. You have to do a series of exams along the way that gives you the whole certificate at the end. And generally, you just don't get credit for one part of it. You need all of the hours at the end to get the certificate. The number of hours at the end are broken up to, well, some in math, some in English, some in management, and so forth, but you need the whole certificate to pass. Generally, there is something like an oral part to that certificate examination, a written part, and a practical demonstration part. If you're going to get certified to put the rockets together for Cape Canaveral, which is a good thing, right, to get certified to do, we've been down there looking at this 3-stage credit by exam process. So, I hope you're getting the idea that it isn't just a little thing that we go through. We often take great care to select reviewers who are able to do these kinds of things. And there is a credit by exam specialist, right, who may be able to do that depending on experience, or we'll bring them along, and various course reviewers, right, who have to have the experience in their discipline. For the credit by exam process, the one thing that we add along with the reviewers who can do content validity issues is a psychometrician. So in addition to looking at the exam process, we also look at psychometrics of the exam itself, so that a person is able to speak to all of the reliability issues that go along with the content validity at the start of that. And for a group like AP, you might say they are such a nationally recognized organization. I mean, they're going out there, they're working with 2 million students a year, administering 4 million AP exams. Why do they need ACE in the process? And actually, I asked them that question when I was up doing them because I wanted to know. They said, well, it's always good to get a third-party look at what's going on. We do a lot of time and effort, right, to get our exams right, but folks also would like to be reassured that it's not just us who's overseeing that process. A group like ACE is also, with its team of experts, signing off to say, yes, we've done it right. And by the way, and I actually asked a person I know at AP if I could say this, he said, yes, it's okay. They don't just always sail free and clear through it. Sometimes we find things that they need to do better and say so, and it can be even at the level of a conditional recommendation, which means when you look through all your books, you'll see that there are various recommendations that can come up. One might be a recommendation that's free and clear. Yes, you're good to go. ACE will stand by 1, 2, 3, or more hours of credit recommendation in that course. Another kind of recommendation is you're good to go, but here are some recommendations we think you should take seriously to improve the process, but won't stop the